Kevin O'Connell indeed gets Coach of the Year, but it was his speech that got everybody buzzing. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast. We're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for getting Locked On Vikings, your first listen of the day, every single day, even stretching on to the off season. We're now officially, everybody's in the off season. Super Bowl's over. Congrats to the Eagles, and we move onward. This show remains daily, year round. So please come hang out into my hashtag everydayers. I appreciate you all so much. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I got a lot of catching up to do. So full disclosure, Thursday and Friday, the shows that you saw, interviews with Tyler Forness and Kevin Fielder, both of whom went to college all-star games. We kind of did the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl thing. They were pre-recorded as I was otherwise occupied at the end of last week. So I pre-recorded those shows, and then a whole bunch of stuff broke, but we have to now catch up on. NFL honors happened. There's quarterback news going on. There's rumors, Hall of Fame. We got all kinds of stuff to go over, not to mention the Super Bowl itself and maybe what can the Vikings learn, although I might table that because I know one of you is going to ask about it in the mailbag. By the way, if you do want to send me questions for that mailbag, that is every Tuesday I do a mailbag here. The mailbag Martez, I like that, is going to be on Blue Sky, where I'll put out a call for questions. So if you follow me there, you can give me that. If you're not on Blue Sky, don't worry about it. There's a Google form in the show notes to any episode that you can fill out, or you can always send me an email at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. So get your questions in that way. So first things first, congratulations. Kevin O'Connell wins Coach of the Year. That was sort of a foregone conclusion to my understanding for a while. And I'm getting that from the sports books took it down in December. They knew it was going to be Kevin O'Connell. I think there were a couple other people who were reasonable candidates that you could maybe argue. Dan Campbell, Dan Quinn is an interesting one. Obviously, the guys, Nick Sirianni, Andy Reid, those guys were in the Super Bowl, right? But with the exception of Dan Quinn, the other three that I just mentioned were all dealing with extraordinarily established quarterback situations. And generally, I would argue more talented teams. I like the talent level on the Vikings. I ended up liking it so much more than I ever thought I would going in. But if you look at the Eagles, the Lions, the Chiefs, those are more talented. Maybe not the Chiefs. The Chiefs are kind of carried by Mahomes. But in its own way, that's still kind of a more talented thing. It's just all buoyed by one player. And Washington, getting to where Washington got with a rookie QB was still pretty awesome. And so, I could see arguments for all of those. I could see arguments for Dan Quinn and whatever. But Kevin O'Connell really accomplished something special. And I know it didn't go anywhere, and that sucks that they kind of fell flat in the playoffs, and they got to address why that is and do that and move forward. But in terms of assessing the accomplishment that Kevin O'Connell was able to put together in 2024. A 14-3 season with Sam Darnold is a different thing than, an 11-win season and a playoff win, but with a rookie quarterback you were excited about. Nobody was excited about Sam Darnold. I certainly wasn't. I think there's one YouTube commenter that was, and congratulations to you. But I think for the most part, nobody exceeded their expectations by more than the Vikings. People looked at Washington and at least thought, well, maybe the rookie's good and they can kind of go 500-ish or something like that. And they exceeded that expectation for sure. But the Vikings were supposed to be bottom five. They were, and I think with good reason. And a lot of the roster problems that were supposed to sink their whole season ultimately did. They just waited until they were in the playoffs. But winning 14 games and beating up teams that did win, beating up the Texans and the 49ers, beating the Packers twice, beating playoff teams was impressive. It was an impressive coaching job. But even on the more like nebulous part of it, the culture that Kevin O'Connell built was very clearly special. And we've now 2 out of these 3 years, we've looked back and gone, man, what a special locker room that was. Hope we can keep it up. And it always changes. Guys are going to leave. Guys that are key to that locker room, like Cam Bynum and Harrison Smith, all slated, Aaron Jones, all slated to be free agents right now. Who knows? And Sam Darnold, not to mention. So how many of those guys come back? If they don't, who kind of takes up the mantle of that like emotional leader? There still is Justin Jefferson, but to be honest, he's not like a rally around kind of guy. That's just not his personality. He's a goofball. He brings you down, right? And he calms you down by, just with levity, right? He's positivity, and that's great, but he doesn't bring what, Everson Griffin brought. This is a different kind of guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I digress. The point is, the locker room makeup of the Vikings, I think, is set up top. I think your team takes on your head coach's personality, and that led to a lot of positivity. And I'm critical of it sometimes. I think there's a lack of urgency that comes to it sometimes. And I think sometimes a lack of self-reflection that kind of leads to a lot of repeat issues but and there's also only so much you can do when, your left tackle goes down for the season, right? Like you're not going to have you're going to have a problem there. Like there's no really way around that. All that is to say, Kevin O'Connell deserved Coach of the Year, and I'm glad he got it. But that wasn't really the conversation anyone was having. I think the only person who I've argued with for real on this has been Matt Derry on Locked On Lions. And I forget if it was on the crossover or like right before or after we were recording it, but he was really adamant on his show that it should have been Dan Campbell and not Kevin O'Connell. And he made interesting points. I think it just comes down to the fact that the Lions have a more talented team. Nobody really expected that from Sam Darnold. Everybody has come to expect that from Jared Goff. And that's kind of what it's like. It's probably just Occam's razor. Like it's just that simple. But anyways, I don't know. Go listen to Matt. He's a great dude. But it was not any of that we've been talking about. The heat of the discourse came from another person in Lions media who misquoted Kevin O'Connell's, I think it was his acceptance speech, right? Where he or a press conference where he talked about, the future of the organization. And he was talking about, just gushing about Justin Jefferson and how he's supposed to be he's going to be a big part of things moving forward. And this Lions reporter whose name escapes me, and I don't really want to go big call out because I think he just made a mistake, but accidentally thought that was about Sam Darnold and was like, oh, Kevin O'Connell is talking about Sam Darnold as like a long-term thing for the Vikings. So if you saw some headline, some social media graphic, some post about Kevin O'Connell talking about Sam Darnold as the long-term solution for the Vikings, you probably saw something that was based off of a misquote and was wrong. So I want to get that record straight. He was talking about Justin Jefferson. And in fact, when asked about Sam Darnold, he used very specific wording. And it's wording we've heard before from Kevin O'Connell. He said, Sam Darnold has earned the right to be a free agent. And then talked, glowingly about everything he did and how much fun it was and how we would love to have him back, but blah, blah, blah. It's a business, and then all the platitudes, right? But he's earned the right to be a free agent. Now that phrase stuck out to me a lot last year when Kevin O'Connell used it about Kirk Cousins. And what that ended up meaning was the Vikings have some pithy offer for Kirk Cousins. Hey, you can come back and play. Here's the 1-year deal we'll do. I think it was maybe it was like 1 and a fake year or something. Not fully guaranteed. Provisional, and we're going to bring a rookie. That's the package. Take it or leave it. And Cousins said, no, thank you. I can get 4 years from Atlanta. I'm taking that. My guess is that we are looking at a similar situation. And that's been my guess, and it's only corroborated by the fact that this is not the first time Kevin O'Connell has used that phrase, he's earned the right to be a free agent. I mean, how can you take that any other way than saying Sam Darnold's going to go be a free agent? Yeah, he's earned the right to go be a free agent, but we're not going to let him. Like, that's not going to happen, right? So I think that that's extraordinarily telling wording from O'Connell. He's earned the right to be a free agent, and he's going to go do that. But I think that we are now at a point where it is public enough, I guess, that Sam Darnold's going to go hit the market. Like, it seems like we've made that choice is, if not made, close to being made. And we should look at the QB market, because just because he goes out there doesn't mean he ain't coming back. What if the market doesn't, turns on him in a way he doesn't expect? What if he decides he wants to stay in Minnesota? There's going to be some offer on the table. It's probably going to be smaller than what he could get from other teams. That's kind of been my guess this whole time. But that doesn't mean that Darnold can't be like, yeah, but I like it there. So what is the QB market like? Plus, we've got Jared Allen in the Hall of Fame. And the other thing is, I actually have a gift for you all from somebody you did not expect a gift from this time of year. So that will be next at Locked On Vikings. Today's Locked On Vikings episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always going to be rattling around your head with all the thoughts of what you need to do, how you need to grow, should we shift these numbers, and especially when it comes to hiring decisions, which are such human decisions. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs can help you with so much of the legwork so you can truly focus on those sort of unknowable things that only you understand about that hiring process. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. They have a feature that can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And if you add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, you can double your reach to qualified candidates. 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Moving right along here. I wanted to do a quick look at the QB market. This is the Vikings aren't going to look for a QB, right? But if they're going to let Sam Darnold go, we should do the math and say, well, what are the odds that his market really give him what he thinks? Or what if he kind of gets shouldered out and he comes back to the Vikings? The Vikings would welcome him with open arms. I'm sure, if he is willing to take whatever offer they give him. But right now, doesn't sound like that's the case. And we'll have to kind of keenly listen for that wording to change. And then maybe or sometimes Diana Rossini just comes out and says, they're going to bring him back. And it's like, oh, okay, well, then I guess something changed. But I also think we're Vikings fans, we're also NFL fans, so we can just look at this, right? But the QB market is changing a lot, and it's changed a lot over the last weekend. So this is sort of something else that I kind of got to catch up on. The Jets, it broke that the Jets are parting ways with Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, probably could have guessed, but now it's like, okay, Pelissero and Rappaport are going on TV and saying that's expected to happen. That's pretty much everything but, the team tweeting we cut him. You have similar stuff going on between the Falcons and Kirk Cousins. I don't know what's going on in Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Rooney has said, yeah, we want to re-sign one of these guys. Don't know who it's going to be. And if it's not going to be both, that puts a guy on the market. So let's do the math here. How many QBs, serious QBs, I'll say, are going to be on the market? And how many teams are going to be looking for those guys? And included in this math is going to be the draft. I think it's probably fair. Yell at me if I'm wrong, okay? But I think it's probably fair to say there's 2 QBs in this draft that teams are going to look at as a genuine shot to be a starter. That's Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I've seen people say ridiculous things about Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or whatever, but at most of the draft rankings and most of the, I would say the hive mind is putting those guys more as day 2 kind of flyer types. So we'll set them all aside from now. If you want to add a third guy to your thing and it changes the way that the math, go ahead, keep it in mind, keep a footnote. So looking at all the QB situations around the league, right now, very clear: Raiders, Giants, Titans don't have a guy. They don't even have the guy that was supposed to be the guy that maybe they're going to cut or whatever. They are very clear. And look, the Titans and Giants both have top 3 picks. Maybe those guys like the QBs, but what if you look at both these QBs and you don't like them? There's a lot of draft analysts that have thought that way. So either way, those guys are in the market. Those 3 are in the market. You can put the Jets in the market. Probably not the Falcons, even though they're getting rid of Cousins. They have Penix, of course. They're going to turn to him. There is an interesting situation in New Orleans. I don't know what they're going to do with Derek Carr. We can just call that a maybe. Go listen to Ross Jackson on Locked On Saints if you really want to know more like the ins and outs of that. But for our purposes, we can call that a maybe, because if Carr does return to the Saints, they're not on the market. And if he does hit the free agent, it also adds a QB to the market. So it either cancels itself out or it doesn't in terms of just tallying this up. So that gives us the Raiders, the Giants, Titans, the Jets, and the Saints. That's 5. There are some other situations worth monitoring, though, that you're probably yelling at me to mention. So how about this? It sounds to me like Geno Smith is staying in Seattle. Like they're working on an extension for him. Corbin Smith, who does Locked On Seahawks, he's said he'd be shocked if they didn't do an extension. So I'm going to take his word on that. Brock Purdy is negotiating an extension in San Francisco. I kind of thought that would be like a great destination for Sam Darnold, and it would also be kind of funny because he was the backup there to Brock Purdy, and then he replaces him for big money. It'd be funny, but it seems like the 49ers are sticking with him. You can find my thoughts on that on Locked On NFL. But, and it sounds like against everybody's will, Deshaun Watson is staying in Cleveland. They kind of don't have a choice with that contract. There's no real way to get rid of it. The only way to make it manageable is to just keep restructuring it until you die. I don't know where that's going to end, but that contract, of course, is making it so that you can't really get rid of Watson unless there are injury provisions or whatever. If he doesn't play in 2025, they might be able to get out of that money or something like that. But I don't see them in the long-term QB market. God, the Brown situation is so weird. Put them down as like a maybe for starting QB, but I'm going to not include them for now because it sounds like they're hoping Deshaun Watson is back at some point in 2025. And even if he's not, maybe they look for like a 1-year Band-Aid type. That might be a Daniel Jones destination, or that might be where, somebody like Malik Willis ends up. But I don't see them going for like Darnold, right? So that puts us again at 5. I just wanted to mention those situations. Oh, another one is the Rams with Matt Stafford. Maybe they draft somebody like Jackson Dart behind Matt Stafford. But again, I don't see them they're not like where the Raiders and Titans are, where like they need a QB. It's priority 1A. Like maybe it's nice to get a guy to start grooming because Stafford's getting old, but I don't think Stafford's going to retire this year. It doesn't sound like it, at least. So that puts us with the same 5 teams: Raiders, Giants, Titans, Jets, Saints. Those are your 5 QB needy teams. And the QBs available: Rodgers, if he still wants to play; Cousins, if he still wants to play; Darnold, of course; Derek Carr, and if he doesn't hit the market, take the Saints off the list. Whichever guy leaves the Steelers, and then you tell me if I'm forgetting any. Maybe Daniel Jones belongs on that list, but as a guy who just got cut, I don't think people are going to bring him in as more than a backup or like maybe a bridge starter to pair with a rookie, but I don't think he takes a team off the list. I don't think we signed Daniel Jones means we're not going to also maybe talk about, drafting someone. Plus your 2 draft QBs. So that's 7 QBs total for 5 teams. So there's more QBs than teams, but not all those guys are made equal. And here is the kicker to all of this. If you are the Giants or the Titans, let's say, and you look at these 2 draft QBs and you go, God, can't do it. Can't do it first overall. Can't do Cam Ward first overall. I wouldn't blame you. I've watched enough of Cam Ward. I'm getting close to finishing a draft eval there, and I'm close enough where I know that I'm not going to be in favor of this guy 1 overall. And then you look at bringing in Kirk Cousins, nightmare. No, absolutely. Aaron Rodgers, absolutely not. Not for this team. If you're in a rebuild, and if you're the Titans, that you're not going to be serious for a couple of years. Try as you might. You're never going to be serious for a couple of years. So getting a Band-Aid QB that's going to be retired by the time your roster is together doesn't jive, right? And so I think that kind of takes a team like the Titans or the Raiders or the Giants out of contention for guys like Rodgers or Cousins, or if it's Russell Wilson. Those guys aren't going to be serious QBs for you by the time you're ready to contend. Somebody like Darnold might. He's 27. So if he comes in and he proves that he's just a fixed guy, and his sabbatical in San Francisco and his rehab in Minnesota fixed him, and now he's a good QB. By the time your roster is together, if you take a couple years to fill your holes, and he's 29 or 30, okay, great. If you can make a build of, say, the Tennessee Titans that works with Sam Darnold as your QB, you've got like 5 or 6 years of him in his 30s, which for a QB is his prime, to take shots at it, right? To contend with it, if that's the plan. It makes sense. So while there are a lot of other QBs on the market, I think for all of these teams, I really do think every single one of these teams, you're looking at Darnold as probably the best option here. I mean, you tell me which of these guys you would want over Sam Darnold in free agency, or which of these rookies you would want. But I think if I'm a QB needy team right now, I'm looking at Sam Darnold and going, yeah, him or Derek Carr, I'm taking Darnold every time. And that is why I think his market's going to be good. And I would be pretty surprised if Sam Darnold's camp and his agent and everybody wasn't thinking along similar lines. And so it's going to be hard for him to take, a 2-year deal, something non-committal from the Vikings. That's where I'm at there. Again, I have a prediction, but I don't know any more than you, really. Like, I know what's public, and my experience covering Kevin O'Connell and things he said in the past, but I want to be clear. I'm being humble about this, okay? That I'm not guaranteeing anything. We'll see what happens, but that's where my read is on the situation. But we got 2 more things, okay? I want to talk a little bit about Jared Allen making the Hall of Fame, and also I've got a special little gift for you. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Hey, I know the NFL is over, but that doesn't mean sports is over. In fact, we're deep into the thick of the NBA, the NHL. Baseball's coming back soon. And there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. You can place live bets throughout a game. So even if you miss the tip off by 2 seconds, you can probably place whatever bet you wanted to place just as a live bet, or you can sit and wait for the game to kind of figure itself out, and then you can bet on a big comeback or whatever it is. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, of course, you can combine your live bets into a big old same game parlay. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Moving right along here, the Locked On Vikings podcast, I have a special gift for you from Radio Row at the Super Bowl. But before we do that, there's more catching up to do. Sam Darnold was a finalist for comeback player of the year. He didn't win it. There's a lot of discourse about if he should be, because he didn't come back from an injury or anything. He came back from suckage. And is that truly a comeback player of the year? And they even had a kind of a directive not to include him, but then he did get included. I don't know. Weird situation, but it went to Joe Burrow, so okay, sure. But also, Hall of Fame announcements. Jared Allen finally made it. I have been on the show before and on other shows saying that I'm in favor of this. Of course, I mean, it's Jared Allen. Come on. He had a phenomenal career. The only thing that's weird about it is that Jim Marshall isn't in yet, and Jared Allen being in before Jim Marshall, at this point, it is just insulting. I got it when it was Alan Page and Carl Eller. That is understandable to me, that they would get in and Jim Marshall wouldn't for whatever, stats reasons. And of course, the problem is Jim Marshall's wrong way run is his legacy. If you look him up, that's the first thing that is attached to him, not the Hall of Fame career that he had. And it is just keeping him, it's just the first thought that too many people associate with him, and it makes them not want to vote for it. They don't want to vote for the wrong way guy. And I think that's a really stupid heuristic, but I think it's just what's happening in brains. But I don't want to take away from Jared Allen making it into the Hall of Fame. Extraordinarily excited about that. Obviously, he just deserves it. There's arguments you can make based on sack totals, arguments you can make based on team impact. And he's just when you think of the Vikings of 2008 and 2009, he's one of the first guys that comes to your mind. And ultimately for me, the Hall of Fame is a fame award, right? It's a museum. It's not the Hall of Stats. It's not the Hall. And I don't think it's like an ultimate ranking of the best players. I think if it were, it would pretty quickly deteriorate when you tried to bring up certain snubs or certain includes that are weird. It's a museum to the great stories and, the most important people to the NFL. I think in the late 2000s, Jared Allen absolutely fits that bill. I think Jim Marshall fits that bill more than anybody in the 70s. That is like way, way, way more than anybody that isn't in yet. But I'll stop complaining about that. The other thing I wanted to mention before we get to our special gift is Randy Moss returns to TV. I spoke about when he came out with his cancer diagnosis about how that really affected me as like somebody who grew up as a big fan of his. Randy Moss to me has always represented cool. Like he is the idea of what is cool. And so to see him suffer, it really, in the same way, you would hate seeing anybody that you looked up to in childhood go through that. Extraordinarily happy to see him back on TV. Seems to be doing better. And I hope that the good health continues. Not much to like analyze about any of those things, but they were worth mentioning. We got some catching up to do. But the other thing is Radio Row. So the reason, by the way, you're hearing all these reports coming out right now, you're just suddenly getting a whole bunch more rumor and conjecture, is because everybody's in the same place right now. They're all in the media centers for a whole week for the Super Bowl, Radio Row and all that. And it'll quiet down now again until the owners meeting, but we got a lot to chew on. But one of the other things that happens at Radio Row is Locked On has a contingent that sits there and pulls people aside and gets, interviews with them whenever they can. One of those people is our good pal, Peter Bukowski. He does Locked On Packers, of course. And he managed to get a word with Kyle Rudolph and sent it to me to share with you. So everybody say thank you to Peter. That he did that. He sent it out of the kindness of his heart. He could have asked questions for his own Locked On Sports Today show, but he asked even about his time in Minnesota. And of course he had to do it in front of a Packers radio show. I guess that's fair. But here is his interview. How about some words from Kyle Rudolph as a special surprise from Locked On and Peter Bukowski to you, the listener.
We're here, Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Kyle Rudolph, longtime NFL tight end, Minnesota Viking. A lot to get to here because this is actually a great tight end Super Bowl. Dallas Goedert, Travis Kelce, and we've seen kind of, this is like the year of the tight end. Brock Bowers, a lot of guys really coming through here. Why do you think that that's the case right now?
Well, I mean, you can go back and look at a lot of the previous Super Bowl winners, and the common denominator typically is a good tight end. When you have a good tight end, it gives you so much flexibility on offense. As they say, it's the quarterback's best friend. And I think the tight end position, not only in this game on Sunday with Dallas Goedert and Travis Kelce, but the tight end position across our league, it's in great hands. Some of the young guys, you mentioned Brock Bowers, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, these guys are all playing at a really, really high level. It's a ton of fun to watch. I think you're seeing an easier transition from college to the NFL. These NFL coordinators are starting to incorporate a lot of college principles, a lot of college style, which is great. The opportunity of back in the day, no, you got to be this prototypical tight end. You got to block this guy and look like that, and just in my opinion, eliminates a lot of athleticism.
That seems to be a big part of it too, though. It's like before, if you wanted to play tight end in the NFL, you had to be an inline guy. You had to be able to block defensive ends, kick guys out, and now they're sort of like, as long as you can catch touchdowns, we kind of don't care. I mean, they do, but
no, 100%. And it's up to the offensive coordinator then. If you have a guy who is 235 pounds and can't be in line and shouldn't be in line, well, it's your job not to put him in line.
Yeah.
But you got to find ways because he's such a mismatch for defenses. Can't cover him with a third or fourth corner. Can't cover him with a linebacker. Can't cover him with a safety. So ultimately, it's up to the offensive coordinator to then figure out, like, okay, how do I still run the football? How do I still use him in the run game without lining him up next to the tackle and ultimately making him block defensive ends?
I have to ask you, because we're in front of the Lambeau Field sign, about your time in Minnesota. That's a lot of Packer games. That rivalry, I think especially when you were there, that was sort of like the rivalry in the NFC North. What were those games like? You had Aaron Rodgers. I mean, a lot of great players on both sides in a lot of those matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us during my time in Minnesota, we knew it was going through us. It was either us or Green Bay, and usually whoever had the upper hand in our individual matchups would have the upper hand in the division. And a lot of great battles with them. They got the best of us early in my career. We kind of found some success there towards the middle. But it was always a great battle. A rivalry, which in my opinion, there was just respect. So much respect for the organization, sustained greatness over a long period of time. Obviously, you look at like 3 quarterbacks in my entire lifetime. I had 3 quarterbacks by week 4 of my second year. So it's just an organization that you admire, you respect, but you also love to beat. Because I knew it's like when we were beating Green Bay, we were having the upper hand in the division, having the likelihood of hosting a playoff game instead of having to go to Green Bay in the wild card round. So yes, an organization that was always tough, but you had that admiration and respect for.
Let's talk about Good Sports while you're here.
Yeah, Good Sports is an incredible organization that I'm fortunate to work with and be here on behalf. Sports are such a huge part of my life. And to think that 75% of parents are considering taking their kids out of sports because they can't afford it, don't have the means to provide for their kids. It's gotten really expensive. It's gotten extremely expensive. And sports taught me so much about life, so many lessons about how to be a good person, how to be a good teammate, how to handle adversity, that these kids will ultimately be robbed of that opportunity if it wasn't for an organization like Good Sports to step up.
Cool. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, thank you.
I kind of wish I had waited, or I'd gotten to this earlier, because I do have thoughts on that tight end point. I think the prevalence of a move tight end is waning, not waxing. But maybe that's a thing for another day. And if you want to hear more, ask me about it. Okay, get your questions in. I will see you all tomorrow. And as always, Skull.